My understanding is that you cannot damage somebody's property just because of your human right. So, because I have the human right to exist, right, I have the right to express my opinion, I cannot commit hate crime. So it's a strong connection I'm making over here, but the point of it is, if I own a property and I'm telling you, you cannot smoke in this property because it's going to affect the value of my property, you cannot smoke in this property. If I'm telling you, you cannot grow marijuana in here, that's where the big problem is. Because there are provisions available where you can have private growers. So people can grow for themselves. Now, does that cause any issue to the house? That's the big question mark right now. Actually, believe it or not, for the amount that they're growing, it doesn't. Yes, it doesn't. Because they don't need, they can do it in an encased closet, and if the humidity levels are controlled, there is no mold growth or anything like that that takes place. So it depends on the size of it. The problem is when you have a large scale operation going on where they use a lot of water, that's where mold growth happens. So there's a lot of different ways of looking at this. It's still up for debate right now, but my opinion is if you tell somebody not to smoke, they can't smoke in the house. Because if they do smoke, you can go to landlord and tenant board.
So should we specify smoke including this?
Specify. Yeah. When in doubt, disclose.
Okay.
All right. Next. In making and enforcing smoking rules, the landlord must follow the Ontario Human Rights Code. See parts M and S for general information. Tenant insurance. There is no tenant insurance requirement. The tenant must be liable for insurance at all times. If the landlord asks for proof of coverage, the tenant must provide it. It is up to the tenant to get content insurance if they want it.
Oh, so you not now it's basically you don't have to have a content insurance,
The tenant never has to have content insurance.
but they always ask for it, right? Everyone's asked
No,
for it.
they ask for liability insurance.
Liability and their content insurance.
Their
yeah?
content is their responsibility, not our responsibility. The disclosure, if you read the disclosure, is that the tenant is responsible for providing their own insurance, and the tenant further acknowledges that the landlord's insurance does not cover any of the contents. So over here, it's the same thing. They have to provide with the liability insurance. Okay, so guys, the insurance that you get, it's not content. It's a rider on that insurance policy.
Yes,
what you're
that's a
getting,
part of that.
yeah, what you're
Building
getting
tax.
is the landlord indemnification. If the tenant's brother comes and trips and falls, it's the tenant's responsibility, not yours. That's what you're getting for insurance.
Okay.
The content insurance is a rider on top of that policy. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
All right.
So is the tenant's stuff also included?
No.
It's,
That's up to them.
Insurance, they can
That's up to
get
them.
this
The landlord's
amount.
policy will not cover it.
Yeah, landlord no.
What if they
And-
don't get liability insurance as well? Say they don't.
Well, you have
You're responsible.
the question then becomes: did you disclose
Mm-hmm.
to your insurance company that it's a rental property? Because if they don't know it's a rental property, then you might not be covered. So those are disclosures. Best thing is to talk to your insurance guy before you actually make those decisions. All right, changes to unit. The tenant may install decorative items such as pictures and window coverings. This is subject to any reasonable restrictions set out in the additional terms in the section 15. The tenant cannot make any changes to the rental unit without the landlord's permission. All right, maintenance and repair. The landlord must keep the rental unit and property in good repair and comply with all health, safety, and maintenance standards. The tenant must repair and pay for any overdue damages to the rental unit and property caused by willful or negligent conduct of the tenant, the tenant's guest, or any other person who lives in the rental unit. The tenant is responsible for orderly cleanliness of the rental unit except for any cleaning the landlord agreed to do. Do you know why it says any cleaning the landlord agreed to do? If you have a high-end unit, one of the ways that you can make sure your property stays in good condition is you say, I'm going to send a cleaning lady every week to clean up the space. And that's my service included for you. That way, you know exactly how clean or how dirty those people are. Now, if you're doing that, you're also committing like $400 a month, something like that to that lease. So this only works with very, very high-end rentals if you're doing them. Short-term rentals is really, really good for that. Everybody with me?
can include some part of this seasonal cleaning of snow removal and whatnot on the.
Yeah, you can do that too, yeah. Those all have to be specified in there. This is the one that was bothering, assignment and subletting. The tenant may assign or sublet the rental unit to another person only with the consent of the landlord. This is the question mark. The landlord cannot arbitrarily or unreasonably withhold consent to a sublet or potential assignee. So, if you have really, really cheap rent right now, you don't have to leave that unit. You can just assign it to somebody else and get them to pay you money. So it's opened up that little door over there. There are additional rules if the tenant wants to assign or sublet. See Part B. Okay? Additional terms. Landlord and tenant can agree to additional terms. Examples may include terms require the landlord to make changes to the unit before the tenant moves in, provide rules for use of common spaces and or amenities. These additional terms should be written in plain language and clearly set out what the landlord and tenant must and must not do to comply with them. If type, the additional type should not be for size 10. Sorry. Should be in a font size that is at least size 10. And additional terms cannot take away the right and responsibility under the Residential Tenancies Act. If a term conflicts with the Residential Tenancies Act and any other term set out here in this form, the term is void, not valid or legally binding, and it cannot be enforced. Some examples of void or unenforceable terms include those that do not allow pets, do not allow guests, roommates, or any occupants. So this is one important one because when we're doing rental applications, we're asking them, hey, who's the occupants in there? So if you have a unit that has one bedroom and there's 2 occupants on it, and then you go in there to see them, and all of a sudden you have 15 people living there, can you do something about it? The answer is yes, you can, but you have to go to the landlord and tenant board. But if they have 1 bedroom and there was 1 person living there, now they have a roommate, so the guy got a girlfriend now and she moved in, can you stop them? No. You can't stop them over here. Alright? Require tenant to pay deposits, fees, or penalties that are not permitted under the Residential Tenancies Act. Damage or pet deposits, interest on rent arrears. Required the tenant to pay for all or parts of repairs that are responsibility of the landlord. I don't like that one either, because I usually have a clause in there that says, hey, anything over $25, I'm responsible for it. So this one basically says that, hey, if the landlord is responsible for changing the bulbs, you cannot ask them you cannot ask the tenant to pay for it. So I don't know how I'm gonna work around that one, because either it would mean that they would have to make sure that, spell it out that they're responsible for changing the light bulbs.
What if it was the tenant's fault that there's?
Well, there's negligent behavior above it, so that covers it, but I'm talking about not having to go in to change a light bulb for a tenant.
Yes.
That's their responsibility, so you just have to make sure you specify that.
So you-
I noticed most of these people, they put in wording $40, $50, whatever. If the only thing goes higher than this amount, is tenant is responsible.
So where would you write that in here?
You would actually add it as includes additional
So
terms.
I just make a little.
Yeah, you'll see it. Alright, after this agreement is signed, it can be changed only if the landlord and tenant agree to the changes in writing. Alright, signatures. And then this is the appendix, so you just attach another page to it. Actually, if you have the fillable form, it actually adds the pages for you. And you can add the terms in there.
Like Schedule A?
Yes. So, when to use the form, change of landlord, this is important. A new landlord has the same rights and duties as the previous landlord. The new landlord must follow all the terms of the agreement unless the tenant and new landlord agree to other terms. Renewing a lease. So, this is important. If the landlord and tenant agree that the tenancy will last for a specific time period, this shall be called a fixed term tenancy. This is because both the start and end date are set out in the tenancy agreement. The end of the agreement does not mean the tenant has to move out or sign a renewal or new agreement in order to stay. Come back to what you were talking about. The rules of the agreement will still apply and the tenant has the right to stay as a monthly tenant if the agreement was for a fixed term or monthly tenancy. as a weekly tenant, if the agreement was for weekly tenancy, or a daily tenant if the agreement is for a daily tenancy. The landlord and tenant can also agree to renew the agreement for other fixed term or enter into a new agreement. If in any case, changes to the rent must follow the rules under the Act, Part I. So, everybody with me so far on this one?
That's it.
So there's a lot of reading. I think I'm gonna stop this over here, and you guys can go through it. If you have any questions, you can let me know. This is what's important. So, when the tenant can end the tenancy, at least 60-day notice if they have a monthly or fixed term. So if they have a 1-year lease, they have to give 60-day notice. So even if they go to month afterwards, at least 28 if they have a daily or weekly tenancy. So if they have a daily tenancy or weekly tenancy, they still have to get 28 days notice.
Even if they're monthly, they have to give a 60 days notice?
Yes.
There's in the previous, if I remember, there was a condition, my mother was moving in, or my son is moving in,
And he's
so tenant can leave 10 days notice.
Yeah.
How
people
much they
abuse
can
it.
give us a notice, like
Yeah.
still 10 days?
No. It's a very detailed process now. If you have family moving in, you have to give them 1 month rent
Okay.
for moving fees, and you also have to give them 60 days, 60 or 90 days, anybody remember?
60.
60 days, right? You have to give them 60 days notice, so you're looking at 3 months out of your pocket.
1 month you have to give?
You have to give them for moving expenses.
What about if the landlord is selling the property and he asks the tenant?
You cannot ask them to leave.
He cannot?
You cannot ask them to leave.
So what was the question?
If the landlord is selling the property and they ask the tenant to leave.
Oh.
You cannot ask the tenant to leave because you're selling the property. Alright, when the landlord can end the tenancy, these are important. The landlord cannot evict the tenant unless the landlord follows the proper rules. In most cases, the landlord must give proper notice to end the tenancy using the right form. Forms are available on the Landlord and Tenant Board's website. The landlord can only give the notice to end tenancy in certain situations. The situations are set out in the Act. A few examples are: tenant cannot pay the full rent when it's due, so that's number one. Tenant causes damage to the rental building or unit or building. Tenant substantially interferes with reasonable enjoyment of other tenants or the landlord. So if you have a tenant that is a DJ that is always blasting music in the basement, can you kick them out?
Yes.
Absolutely. You have to serve the notice and you have to keep track of it, but you can. If the landlord gives a tenant a notice to end the tenancy, the tenant does not have to move out. If the tenant does not move out, the landlord must apply to the Landlord and Tenant Board in order to evict the tenant. So you have to go through the Landlord and Tenant Board, pay $170. The Landlord and Tenant Board will hold a hearing and decide if the tenancy should end. Well, the landlord and the tenant can come to the hearing and explain their side of to the Landlord and Tenant Board. If the Landlord and Tenant Board orders an eviction, the eviction order can only be enforced by the sheriff. How many of you know that we have sheriffs in Canada too?
We have.
If it is an offense for the landlord to evict a tenant without following the process, if convicted, the landlord could face fines up to $25,000 or $100,000 for a corporation. If the landlord and tenant agree to end the tenancy, the tenant and landlord can agree to end the tenancy at any time by using a proper Landlord and Tenant Board form. Some landlords may ask for tenants to sign this form when signing the agreement. In most cases, an agreement to end tenancy signed at the beginning of the tenancy agreement is unenforceable and a tenant does not have to move out. See, there were people that are actually, hey, I'm giving it to you for a year, sign this end of tenancy agreement for the end of the year, and then it was unenforceable. There's more information about how to end tenancy and reason for evictions in the Act in a brochure on the Landlord and Tenant Board website. Then, giving notices and documents. The landlord and tenant have to deliver some official notices and other documents in writing. These notices and documents can be hand-delivered, left in mailbox, in place where mail is only delivered, mailed. This will count as delivery 5 days after mailing. There are also other ways to serve notices and documents. For more information, contact the Landlord and Tenant Board. Rent is the amount the tenant pays to the landlord to occupy the rental unit and receive services or facilities agreed to in the agreement. The tenant must pay their rent on time. If they do not, the landlord can give notice to end the tenancy. If the tenant asks for a receipt of the rent or any payment or deposits, the landlord must give them one for free. This also applies to a former tenant who asks for a receipt 12 months after the end of their tenancy. Alright? Rent discounts. The landlord can offer tenant a discount for paying rent on time or before its due date. The discount can be up to 2% of the lawful rent. The landlord can also offer rent-free period or discounts in one or three ways. Rent-free period up to 3 months within any 12-month period. A discount of up to 1 month rent spread evenly over 8 months. A discount of up to 2 months rent up to 1 month's rent spread evenly over the first 7 months, and up to 1 month rent discounted in the in one of the last 5 months. These type of discounts must be agreed upon in writing. Do you do rental discounts?
Not these days.
It depends, like if you have a property that is really, really hard to rent. So you have somebody that comes in that says, hey, you know what, I can rent the property, but I don't have all the money up front right now. Can you give me some free rent with it? Like, okay, if you sign a 1-year lease, I'll give you some free rent. It hasn't really applied to Toronto in a very, 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 very long time. But it is available. All right?
So
Depo-
what type of discount?
1 month free.
You spread it out over the course of, like you see it says, a discount of up to 1 month's rent spread evenly over 8 months. So 1 month's rent is how much?
That's $800.
$800, right? $800 over 8 months, you're gonna give them a $100 discount. So they're gonna be paying $700 for 9 months. Everybody with me? All right, deposits. The landlord can only collect a deposit from last month's rent and a refundable key deposit. The tenant does not have to provide any other form of deposit, such as pet or damage deposit. If the tenant pays anything more, the tenant can apply to the landlord and tenant board to get the money back. Rent deposits are last month's rent. The landlord can require the, sorry, I'm just gonna confirm how much battery I have left. Okay, 2%. All right, the landlord can require a rent deposit on or before all right, the landlord can require a rent deposit on or before the tenant enters into the tenancy agreement. The landlord must apply this money to the rent of the last period of the tenancy. The rent must not be more than 1 month's rent, or the rent for 1 month's rental, whichever is less. The landlord must pay the tenant interest on the rent deposit every year. If the rent increases after the tenant has paid a rent deposit, the tenant can require the tenant to top up the rent deposit, or that it is the same as the new rent. The landlord can use the interest on the rent top up of the rent deposit. Does that make sense, what we were talking about before? So there's interest accrual taking place every year. The rent is going up, so your rental amount stays the same, but because you have to pay interest on it, it always can be used as a last month's deposit. Or you say, hey, this is your rent interest, $2.50. You don't have to pay $2.50 back. Take that money back. All right? If the landlord is unable to let the tenant move into the rental unit, the landlord must return the deposit unless the tenant agrees to rent a different unit.
So is that the different, it applies on the different way? Let's say, for example, it happened in the past, then signed the agreement, everything, but 5 days later they came back and said, can I get my deposit back?
No.
I just found a better place.
No. That's different. This is when they haven't moved in. And
No,
the
you haven't
ID
moved it.
Hmm?
You haven't moved it.
Yeah, but the date is passed, right?
Yeah, this is passed, and it says your deposit return by 24 hours from now, it's not gonna be returned. But I still give it to him, that's okay.
Okay. All right, key deposit. If the landlord collects a deposit for the keys or more entries, the landlord must return the deposit when the keys are returned. The landlord can charge the tenant for additional keys that the tenant requests. For example, if the tenant wants an extra key, or if the tenant has lost their key, but the charge cannot be more than the actual cost of the key. This is not a key deposit. All right. Do I need to go through the rent increases?
Rent is a simple one.
I feel like I'm going through the whole tenancies act over here.
It was up there.
No, I know.
So
I'm
this
just-
is all, when we'll sign this, the tenant
This is
Yeah.
gonna be new
so
form.
confused.
So this is picture your place, agreement to lease
Still they can
400,
get confused with the
and
few
this is
pages.
in effect, along with the same rental application that
That's
you
correct.
should use.
That's correct.
So if you're adding in some schedules, you do it in the end.
Yes.
Oh.
When you're doing the fillable one, you'll see it in the fillable one. Sorry guys, my battery is just died, almost dead. So I just don't wanna start something and then it not go through. Can you grab my laptop, my other laptop in the office?
Sure.
Sitting on-
I have a question.
Yes.
If the tenancy agreement is for a fixed term, let's say 1 year,
Mm-hmm.
and if for some reason the tenant has to leave, he has to give a 60 days notice.
Yes.
And same goes for the landlords, they have to give us 60 days notice.
For what reason?
A family member is going to move in into the house.
Okay, you have to give 60-day notice and 1 month
1 month rent.
rent for moving fees.
Why don't we
Or
just kill the
find an
landlords?
Right?
Or find a
Welcome to
custodial
Lease.
space equivalent to what their existing.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't get that.
Or find a space equivalent to what you
Equivalent to what
Your
you
rental place.
Third option is
Yeah.
this. You provide a free service.
Is this, is this all written
Still,
written laws?
they all-
Yeah.
Because I have a client
They
who's in
plus
trouble right
for,
now.
Unfortunately, that's not good for
and
me.
that
If the
is one of the
tenancy
reasons
is
price
month-to-month
hike.
basis, then also it's a 60 days
Just
notice?
because of this-
Yes.
Yes.
This COVID.
Okay,
But finding the
let's say
same
the
rent after 3
situation where
years.
a landlord's relative is going to move into that property. They have to give a 60 days notice, and when they decide, the tenant also decides to leave, then they have to sign that form that says,
Notice to end tenancy.
yeah,
Yeah.
that also has to be signed,
By the
has to be.
By the tenant and
The
landlord.
basis for that one.
Both parties have to
If
sign
you're
it.
getting some family member or somebody, right, but if you're not.
Can
getting, right,
They do something like this,
and
where
they
they say that
include it
someone's
all
gonna
that,
move in,
you just use it.
and
to-
once the tenancy, the notice to end is already signed off, okay? They pay the movers fee, and they give the 60 notice, but then.
Somebody else moves in?
Yeah, somebody else moves in. What was that thing? I forgot the word for it. They just wanna basically charge somebody $200.
Renovation?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, there are people that are doing that too.
What's that, you were saying?
Like they basically just say some family member's gonna move in, but then they give it to a new tenant, and they charge them
What's the
$200 more.
period in between the 2 weeks?
Say, doesn't matter, say they already give the 60 days plus the movers fee.
I think there is a timeline in there too. You cannot rent it out to somebody else for I think like a year.
For a year?
And how would you even find out?
Online finding out if you're gonna list it or go to Kijiji and they figure it out.
Yeah, but what if it was a son, you know?
But then you can
Yeah,
always,
then you can just say it's family living there,
if
right?
you have,
Yeah, that's what it
if
is.
you're a tenant and you have too much time, you can knock the door, you can find out.
Yeah.
So what actions can be taken, should be taken against that landlord? If he lies and he rented it higher rent and he kicked off the previous tenant, nothing.
Consult with the lawyer, go to landlord and tenant board.
Then it will take months and months to finalize.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? That's why landlords have been enjoying it. This is the reason why it's becoming like this, right? Because landlords have been taking advantage of the situation because the market has been going up and people have been losing out on cheap housing. They've been having trouble. They're losing out on cheap housing because they end up finding a way of kicking somebody out, and then once they're gone, then they basically rent it out to somebody else. Should have just kept continuing over here.
Bless you.
Can we put the clause like tenant is responsible for the snow removal and everything?
Yes.
Yeah.
Many times, mostly.
I know it's there always, but.
I think you can put the clause.
The landlord.
Law, if something happens to the tenant.
That goes to the landlord's insurance, right?
Yeah.
That goes to the.
Does anybody have that phone number, that link that I had shared? What was the phone number?
1-8 something.
I'll just plug into my laptop.
187.
1827? 1827?
So it was www.
mah.gov.
1870.
Yeah, it's there.
187.
What was it?
18704.
No, it says page 1,
ASPX.
187.
704. ASPX.
See if you can fill it over.
That's our open. This one doesn't work either.
So you need to have,
Download,
I'm not updating that stupid thing right now.
okay, yeah. Maybe download the form, on your
It
desktop.
is downloaded.
Oh, it's downloaded, okay. Do you want my computer? Yeah.
Where is my download now?
You want a charger? You put a charger, it will be fine.
Do you have a charger?
No. This is Mac, right? I have a charger, you can do that.
Now you know I don't use the laptop. Alright, so let's go back to where we were. Alright, so the landlord must keep the rental unit. Oh, we did all this already. Oh, did we? No, we didn't do this one. Rent increases. So, let's go over that. Most Ontario tenants are protected by rent controls that limit how much rent can increase year over year. The rent payable by tenant must also decrease in limited situation. Normally, the landlord can increase the rent only once every 12 months. The landlord must use the proper landlord and tenant board form and give the tenant at least 90-day notice before. Sorry, I said somebody 60 days before. It's actually 90 days.
Yeah, 90 days.
Before the rent increase is to take effect. The rent can also be increased by no more than the rent increase guidelines unless the landlord and tenant board approves a rent increase above the guideline. The guideline for each year can be found on the landlord and tenant website.
So the percentage that we just basically.
But
Yeah.
90 days is for rent increase,
You have
not
to
for
give-
eviction, right?
No.
No, 90 days. So let's say I signed the lease in April, right? In December, I should be giving them a notice that, hey, your rent is increasing next month, for next year, if you decide to stay here by 2.6% or whatever the amount is. So I have to give them 90 days
90 day for rent increase.
before the end of the term.
Yeah.
Alright? The landlord can apply to the landlord and tenant board for approval to raise the rent by more than the rent increase guidelines. Affected tenants can oppose this application at the landlord and tenant board. This kind of rent increase is called an above guideline rent increase. The landlord and tenant board can allow this kind of rent increase if the landlord's municipal tax and charges have significantly changed. The landlord has done major repairs or renovations. The cost of external security services not performed by the landlord's employees have increased, or external security services are being provided for the first time.
No mention of any utility bills or anything.
No,
But if you're paying a utility bill.
but you do have it, so this is talking about external security services, no?
What do you
No.
mean?
Security services are if you went and you installed like big doors, you installed new doors and you have to amortize them.
Oh, okay.
Or you would have like cameras installed, card access installed.
Punch keys, whatever,
Yeah.
okay.
Right? The landlord and tenant can also agree to above guideline rent increases if the landlord agrees to renovate and add a new service to the tenant. Certain rules apply. Rent reduction. The landlord must reduce the rent if the municipal property goes down by more than 2.49%?
That doesn't happen.
Never.
Today is 1.8.
The rent was, sorry?
This year 1.8%.
No, this is talking about property tax going
The
down.
property tax.
Yeah. The rent was increased above the guideline to pay for repairs or renovation, and the cost has been fully paid for, and this applies to tenants who are living in the unit when the above guidelines or increase happens. So if you had a bunch of renovations that had to be done in the property, right, and then the tenants got together, they put all their money, and then they renovated the property, their rents would actually go down to pay for that. The tenant can apply to the landlord and tenant board to reduce their rent if the municipal. What happened? Municipal property taxes and charges on the property go down. So now your tenants can actually keep tabs on your property tax, and if they go down by more than 2.4%, they can apply for this. The landlord reduce or remove the service without reducing the rent. The landlord did not keep a promise they made in an arrangement for a rent increase above the guideline. So their rents will go down.
How much can you decrease it by, or how much can they demand to decrease?
Well, they can demand for free. They can demand it to be free.
If you don't do it yourself.
How many of you know there was a rent strike last year in May?
Oh, yeah.
That's in a Parkdale area?
Yeah, Parkdale.
Yeah,
Yeah.
There's a couple of
Did you know
buildings,
they
yeah.
actually got away with it? They got a 1 month free because the properties were so piss poor managed.
Yeah.
That's thousands of dollars. That got, it was Metcom, I don't want to name it.
Metcalf or something
Yeah.
like that.
I don't remember, I don't want to name any
Metcalf,
company.
It was a
CFD.
poorly,
I don't want to name any company.
it was a poorly managed, the process, the whole process
It's,
poorly
the
managed.
property just wasn't being managed properly.
Yeah.
Anyway, but in that case, they were able to get them on 1 month free. So maintenance and repairs. The landlord must keep the rental unit and property in good repair and comply with all health, safety, and maintenance standards. This includes the maintenance and repair of the things that come with the unit, such as appliances, and of common areas such as parking lots, elevators, and hallways. The tenant must pay their rent, even if they have problems with the maintenance and repair of the unit. If the tenant is having maintenance and repair problems, then the tenant should let the landlord know. If needed, the tenant can apply to the landlord and tenant board. The tenant is responsible for any damage to the rental unit caused by the tenant, the tenant's guest, or any other person who lives in the rental unit. This applies to any damage caused on purpose or by not being careful enough. That's a very good word, careful enough. This does not include damages that result from normal use of the rental unit over time, wear and tear. The landlord can apply to the landlord and tenant board if the tenant has not